In late 1776, morale in the Continental Army was at a low after losses at the Battle of White Plains in October and at Forts Washington and Lee in November. Chased by the British, General Washington retreated across New Jersey and into Pennsylvania. His force, in threadbare uniforms and many without shoes, was reduced to a few thousand, and enlistments were set to expire. By December, the troops were huddled along the western bank of the Delaware River, with the waterway and winter weather helping to keep the British at bay. Thomas Paine's The American Crisis was passed around campfires, reigniting a passion for the revolutionary cause and helping to steady the soldiers' spirits and resolve. Washington, like all good generals, needed intelligence at Trenton and Princeton for his attack. This is where our unknown spy comes in. At Crossroads, Colonel John Cadwalader sent a very intelligent young gentleman to scout for information at Princeton. He arrived about noon and gathered vital data, but General Leslie and Lieutenant Colonel Robert Abercrombie detained him when he tried to leave town that evening. The young spy escaped the village the next morning and returned to Crosswicks, where he reported that there were about 5,000 enemy soldiers at Princeton, about equally divided between Hessians and British troops. The British commanders in Princeton believed that the Americans had no more than 5,000 or 6,000 men, many forced to starve, and many were deserting each day. Based on the young man's information, Cadwalader drew a rough map of Princeton and the roads around it, indicating artillery emplacements and redoubts under construction or scheduled to begin building that morning. The young man saw no sentries on the back or east side of the village. He learned that some nights the men laid on their arms in expectations of an attack and paraded each morning about an hour before daybreak. Consequently, the soldiers were very fatigued and had suffered a food shortage until the previous night, when a large number of wagons arrived from New Brunswick with provisions. Troops, including Dunlop's Hessians, continued to arrive at Princeton. About 50 light horse troops were at Princeton, with half the men occupying quarters at Scudder's Mill to the east, and the other half on the west side of town. A vital element on the sketched map, soon called Spy Map, was that it showed a road leading to the back of Princeton on the east side that saw only light use and was not guarded by the British. This road was a makeshift country lane, functionally linking the Stony Brook Friends Meeting House to a sawmill on Stony Brook, east of the village, also declining in use after the late 1760s. It was still clear enough to be used by Washington as an approach to Princeton. The Revolution has a lot of stories like this, where an unknown person did so much for the cause. He went directly into the enemy camp, got captured, escaped, and came back, with so much left to the imagination. You could make a movie about just what happened between those two sentences. Not to mention the feelings that this young man was feeling when he was walking around town, knowing one mistake may have meant his death. It is these types of stories and these types of men who founded America. Men who were willing to put everything on the line. Whether they got famous or known was of no consequence. They did things because they were the right thing to do, because they needed to be done.